Is it true? Are you seriously moving to your parents' house? Yes, Ava. We need a change, and we've got an opportunity to help them out. Besides, it's been tough with everything going on. Luke's voice was calm, but there was a firmness that Ava ignored. Tough? You have no idea what tough is. If the truth comes out, you'll wish you never left. Her words hung in the air, wrapped in a tension that made my heart pound. I stood in the hallway, listening. No one expected their plans to unravel over a Sunday brunch. Rachel, you've been quiet about all this. What's your take? Ava directed her sharp gaze at me. I took a deep breath. It's not just about us, Ava. My parents need us. Given your situation, wouldn't it be better if we helped each other out? She laughed, a bitter sound that clanked like broken glass. Help? You think moving back to your parents is going to help anyone? That place is a ticking time bomb. Ellie stood at the kitchen door, eyes wide. Mom, why is Aunt Ava so angry? Honey, go back to your room. We'll call you when breakfast is ready, I said, trying to keep my tone light, but my daughter's worried face didn't ease my tension. A ticking time bomb? Luke echoed, ignoring Ellie's departure. Ava, if you've got something to say, just say it. She shook her head. You'll see. With that, she grabbed her coat, storming out the door without another word. Once Ava was gone, I turned to Luke. What was that about? I don't know, but she's been acting erratically for months. Maybe we'll get some peace away from here, Luke said, rubbing his temple. Maybe, I murmured, hoping he was right. But Ava's words lingered in my mind. Luke and Ellie spent the next few hours packing up the last of our boxes. I joined them, glancing at the photos on the walls, the memories embedded in our home. Moving was a big decision, but my parents, John and Susan, needed us. When Dad's health had taken a turn for the worse, it felt right to go back and help. 3 days later, we were pulling up to my childhood home. The place looked the same, yet different. The garden was overgrown, the paint peeling. Inside, my mother's tired smile and my father's weakened stance were immediate reminders of why we'd come. Welcome home, Susan said, embracing me tight. Thanks, Mom. We're here to help, I assured her. But as we settled into the spare bedrooms, Ava's parting words echoed in my head. She had exposed a fissure, and I could sense there were cracks we had yet to uncover. That night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she asked, Why does Aunt Ava hate us? She doesn't hate us, I reassured her. Sometimes adults just have complicated feelings. Everything will be okay. But as I closed Ellie's door, the unease remained. Ava's mysterious warning wasn't just a hollow threat. It beckoned a storm on the horizon, one that could tear our lives apart, or force us to come together stronger than before. The clang of dishes settled in the background as we adapted to my parents' home. Luke was in the living room, trying to set up his laptop, while Ellie helped Grandma with the garden. Just as I started unpacking the kitchen, the doorbell rang. Rachel, get that for me, will you? Susan called from the backyard, her voice laced with weariness. I opened the door. Ava stood there, uninvited, with the same intensity in her eyes. What are you doing here, Ava? I asked, my words sharper than I intended. Just checking in, she replied, striding past me before I could react. I see you've wasted no time making yourselves at home. Ava, this isn't the time, Luke said, standing up, his focus still on the glitchy laptop. She ignored him, walking through the house like it was her own. You really think living here will solve your problems? This place isn't a sanctuary. It's quicksand. Ava, leave it, I snapped, stepping between her and the narrow hallway leading to my parents' room. You don't get it, do you? You've always been clueless, Rachel. I've had to clean up my own messes without any help, she retorted, her face inches from mine. Aunt Ava? Ellie's voice cut through the tension. She was standing by the back door, dirt smeared on her cheeks, looking confused and scared. I softened my tone as I turned to her. Why don't you go show Daddy the lovely flowers you planted, Ellie? Ellie hesitated but nodded, casting nervous glances at Aunt Ava before disappearing into the living room. Why are you doing this? I asked Ava more quietly, but no less forcefully. Why do you think? She snapped, her mask of bitterness cracking. Look, just keep your nose out of my business. This house isn't a safe harbor. There are secrets here you don't want to uncover, trust me. Suddenly, Dad's voice came from the hallway, weak but clear. What's going on out here? Nothing, John. Just a bit of family disagreement, Ava answered sweetly, her demeanor changing instantly. I watched in disbelief as she turned on the charm, smiling at Dad like she wasn't just spitting venom at me. "Ava, come help me with something in the dining room," I said, not giving her the option to refuse. She followed, though her expression made it clear she was seething. As soon as we were out of earshot, I confronted her again. "Stay away from my family, Ava. If you've got issues, deal with them in your life, not ours." She leaned in, eyes dark with anger. "You've made a mistake moving here, Rachel. Remember that." She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. That evening, as we gathered around the dinner table, the air was thick with Ava's lingering presence. My father tried to keep the conversation light, but it was clear everyone felt unsettled. Ava's threats had shaken me. But more than that, they fueled a resolve I hadn't felt before. This was our home now, and I would fight to protect it. "Dad's really looking weak, Luke," I said as we watched my father struggle to get up from his chair. His shaky hands and labored breathing tugged at my heart. "I know. We need to figure out a way to help them more," Luke replied, brows furrowed in concern. Susan hurried over, placing a steadying hand on John's shoulder, worry etched deep on her face. Dad's illness was progressing faster than we had anticipated, and Mom's own health wasn't great either. "Mom, let me," I said, offering my hand, but she waved me off gently. "I've got it, Rachel. Just give him a moment." Ava barged in, not bothering to knock. "Looks like I'm right on time for the family crisis," she sneered, her eyes flicking between Dad and me. "Not now, Ava," Luke cut in, but she ignored him. "What's the plan, Rachel? Going to nurse him back to health all by yourself? Or are you finally going to admit you need help?" Ava's voice dripped with sarcasm. "We don't need this from you right now, Ava," I shot back, keeping my voice as steady as I could. Ava rolled her eyes. "Fine. Just don't come running to me when things get worse. And believe me, they will." Luke stepped forward. "If you're not going to help, then leave. We've got enough to manage without your negativity." Ava smirked and whispered so only I could hear, "Do you really think your presence here will make a difference? Or will it just unravel more secrets?" She turned on her heel and left before I could respond. Later that night, as I helped Susan prepare Dad's medications, the weight of it all made my hands tremble. We barely had a moment to catch our breath before another visit from Ava turned everything upside down. "Rachel, can we talk?" John's voice was weak but insistent. "Of course, Dad. What is it?" He patted the seat next to him. "There's something you need to know. Ava. She's been taking money. She said she needed it for debts, but it's gone too far. Your mother and I didn't want to worry you, but it's starting to hurt us." "What? How much has she taken?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Too much. We didn't want to believe it at first, but now we have no choice," Dad admitted, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. "When did you find out?" Luke asked, coming to stand beside me. "Months ago, but we thought she'd stop. She hasn't," Susan said softly. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was an outright betrayal. "We have to stop her, Dad. We can't let her get away with this." "We will," Luke said, taking my hand. "We'll handle this together." Ava's deceptive antics had driven a wedge in our family, and it was time to remove it once and for all. John's confession was the last straw. Ava would face the consequences of her actions. The plan to move wasn't just about supporting my parents anymore. It was about guarding them from someone who should have been their protector. As the night settled in, we knew things were about to get even tougher. But this time, we were ready. Ellie and I were setting the table for dinner when Ava burst in again, this time with her usual dramatic flair. "Rachel, we need to talk," she demanded, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. "Not now, Ava. We're about to have dinner," I replied, trying to keep the peace. Ava ignored my words and marched into the kitchen, brushing past Ellie. "This can't wait." Luke, overhearing the commotion, stepped into the kitchen. "Ava, we told you to stop coming over unannounced. What do you want?" Ava's gaze darted nervously, her usually fierce demeanor slightly off-kilter. "I need some money, just a bit to tide me over." "You have a lot of nerve," I said, placing the plates down with a bit more force than necessary. "You've already taken so much from Mom and Dad, and now you're asking for more?" Ava's face twisted into a scowl. "You think you're so perfect, don't you, Rachel? Living here, playing the hero, but you have no idea the mess you're stepping into." "Enough, Ava," Luke interrupted. Any help you needed, you could have come to us like a decent person, but you chose to steal from your own family." "I had no choice," she shouted, her voice echoing through the small kitchen. "There's always a choice," I replied quietly. Susan entered, frail and leaning heavily on her cane. "What's going on here?" "Ava needs to leave," I said firmly. "She's causing more problems." "Absolutely not," Susan replied. "If Ava has problems, we handle them as a family." Ava looked at our mother, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "See, even Mom gets it." "Ava, you need help," Susan said gently, "but stealing and lying isn't the way. You need to face what you've done." Tears welled in Ava's eyes, but her expression hardened. "I don't need your pity. Fine, I'll leave, but don't think this is over." As she stormed out, the room felt lighter, but also filled with an uneasy silence. I looked at my father, who had been quietly watching the whole scene unfold. "She's desperate, Rachel," John said softly. "Desperate people do desperate things." "I know, Dad," I replied. As we sat down for dinner, the weight of Ava's actions hung over us. Every clink of silverware was a reminder of the chaos she brought, but also the resolve to see this through. Later that night, Luke and I sat down at the dining table, papers spread out before us. We'd been collecting evidence of Ava's deception. "We need to talk to Mark, get his advice," Luke said, sifting through the documents. "I'll call him tomorrow," I confirmed. "We can't let Ava destroy our family any further." The next day, as I dialed Mark's number, I knew there was no turning back. Ava had set the stage for this confrontation, and we needed every bit of strength to see it through. As the phone rang, I glanced around the home that now served as both sanctuary and battleground. Ava's actions would have consequences, and we were ready to face them head-on. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, and finally putting things right. The next morning, I sat in the living room, phone pressed to my ear as Mark picked up. "Mark, we need your help. It's about Ava." "Rachel, I've been expecting your call. Luke gave me a heads up. Tell me everything." I laid out the details. Ava's embezzlement, her erratic behavior, and John's confession about her taking money from our parents. Mark listened intently. "This is serious, Rachel. We need to gather all the evidence you've got." I sighed in relief. "We've started, but there's a lot to sort through." "Meet me at my office tomorrow morning. We'll figure out our next steps," Mark instructed. "I'll be there," I promised, feeling a spark of hope. After hanging up, I found Luke and Ellie in the backyard. "Mark's on board," I said, squeezing Luke's shoulder. "We meet him tomorrow." "Good," Luke replied, relief evident in his eyes. "It's time to put a stop to this." Ellie, picking flowers by the fence, looked up with a curious expression. "What's going on, Mom?" "Just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about," I reassured her, but my mind was racing with the gravity of our plan. That evening, Luke and I stayed up late, organizing the piles of paperwork, receipts, bank statements, and emails, each piece a puzzle in Ava's betrayal. The silence of the night magnified the weight of what we were uncovering. "Look at this," Luke said, holding up a bank statement. "Here's proof she's been diverting funds." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "We're going to get through this together." The next day, I walked into Mark's office with a box full of documents. He greeted me with a nod, immediately diving into the paperwork. "Rachel, this is a solid start," Mark said, flipping through the statements. "But we need more. Photocopy everything and get any digital records you can." Returning home, I found Ava's car parked outside. My heart sank. What did she want now? I entered the house cautiously. Ava was in the living room, chatting with my mother. "Oh, there you are, Rachel," Ava said, feigning sweetness. "What do you want, Ava?" I asked, exhausted by her games. "I need to talk to you alone," she said, eyes narrowing. "Fine, let's step outside," I agreed, not wanting to upset my parents further. On the porch, Ava dropped the act. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Digging through my business?" "You've brought this on yourself, Ava," I responded firmly. "It's time you face the consequences." "There are things you don't know, Rachel. Be careful, or you'll find out too late," she threatened, her voice menacing. "We'll see about that," I countered, holding her gaze until she stormed off. Back inside, I collapsed into a chair. Luke joined me, concern etched on his face. "What did she say?" "More threats," I answered, trying to shake off the encounter. "We need to keep going. Mark wants us to gather more evidence." "Then let's do it," Luke said, determination hardening his voice. The The next few days were a blur of copying documents, scanning records, and meeting with Mark. Every piece of evidence brought us closer to exposing Ava's deceit. It was grueling work, but with every step, I felt the resolve building within me. As we prepared for the next phase, I knew we were on the right path. Ava had underestimated us, and she was about to learn the true meaning of family loyalty and justice. With Mark guiding us, we had the support we needed to finally confront her and bring the truth into the light. The dining room buzzed with anticipation as I set the table for dinner. Tonight wasn't just any family meal. It was the night we would finally confront Ava. Luke and I had everything prepared. Mark would be arriving soon, under the guise of joining us for dinner. Susan and John shuffled in, unaware of what was coming. "Dinner smells wonderful, Rachel," Susan commented, her tired eyes lighting up at the sight of the spread. "Thanks, Mom. We wanted to make tonight special," I replied, forcing a smile. Ellie volunteered to call Ava, who, unsurprisingly, arrived with an air of self-importance. "What's this all about?" she asked, suspicion lacing her tone as she sat down. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Luke went to answer it, and seconds later, Mark stepped into the room. Ava's eyes widened when she saw him, but she quickly masked her shock with feigned indifference. "Hello, everyone," Mark greeted warmly, taking a seat. "Hope I'm not intruding." "Nonsense," John replied. "It's nice to have company." With everyone seated, we started dinner. Tension simmered just below the surface. Ava kept throwing Mark curious glances, clearly wondering why he was there. "Mark, how's work?" Luke asked casually, setting the stage. "Oh, busy as ever," Mark replied. "But always happy to help friends, especially when legal matters are involved." Ava's fork clattered onto her plate. "Legal matters? What's this about?" "Ava," I began, feeling the tension in my voice. "We know what you've been doing, taking money from Mom and Dad, and from our joint account. We have the evidence." "What are you talking about?" Ava snapped, but her voice quivered, betraying her. Luke placed printed bank statements and emails on the table. "These documents don't lie. You've been embezzling from us, and from our parents." Ava's face turned pale. She glanced around the room, looking for an escape route. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to blame me for your problems." "It's over, Ava," I said firmly. "We're done with your lies and theft." "You have no proof," she hissed, but her defiance faltered. Mark opened his briefcase, pulling out more evidence. "Actually, we do, and it's enough for legal action." Susan's face crumpled, tears forming in her eyes. "Ava, how could you? We trusted you." John looked equally hurt, his frail hands shaking. "We only ever wanted to help you." Ava's bravado shattered. I had no choice. I was drowning in debt." "Ava," I said, my voice breaking, "we could have helped you if you'd come to us, but you chose to betray us instead." She slumped back in her chair, defeated. "What now?" she muttered. "We're giving you a chance to make things right," Luke said. "Return what you took and we won't press charges, but if you refuse, we have no choice but to take legal action." Ava's eyes darted between us, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded, her spirit broken. "Fine, I'll repay everything." "Good," Mark said, collecting the evidence. "We'll draw up the paperwork." The dinner ended in silence, tension slowly dissipating as Ava agreed to our terms. As the evening wrapped up, Ava left, a shadow of her former self. Susan and John hugged us tightly, grateful but heartbroken. Luke and I shared a weary smile, knowing the hardest part was over. When Ellie kissed us goodnight, I felt a deep sense of relief. Ava's reign of deceit had ended, and our family could finally begin to heal. As we closed the door on that tumultuous chapter, the future felt just a bit brighter. The following week, Ava's presence hung like a dark cloud. She came around, but the hostility was palpable. We all knew this fragile peace wouldn't last. One afternoon, while Luke and I were going over the repayment plan with Mark, Ava barged into the house, her face flushed with anger. "You think this is over? You're ruining my life." "We're holding you accountable, Ava," Luke said firmly. "You brought this on yourself." "You think you know everything, don't you?" Ava spat. "There's more to this than you realize." "Like what?" I quickly interjected, trying to maintain composure. Ava's expression twisted with frustration. "You wouldn't understand. You've always had it easy." "Easy? Caring for our sick parents and dealing with your betrayal doesn't exactly qualify as easy," I shot back. "You think you're so perfect, Rachel, always playing the martyr," she sneered, stepping closer. Her eyes flicked to Mark, seated with us. And you bring in your lawyer friend to make sure I'm boxed in. Typical. That Mark cleared his throat. Ava, this isn't personal. It's about rectifying the financial damage you've caused. Financial damage? It's more than that. It's not just numbers on a page, she seethed, her voice rising. This is about survival. Luke stood up, his calm demeanor beginning to crack. Survival doesn't justify your actions. You stole from your own family. Ava's resolve seemed to waver for a moment before she hardened again. Fine. You want the full story? I had no choice because of Dad's medical expenses. You think that stayed in the black? No, it didn't. I was the one juggling the bills, not you. Dad, his voice weak but steady, joined us from the living room. Ava, we never asked you to carry that burden alone. Why didn't you come to us? Ava laughed bitterly. Because you and Mom buried your heads in the sand. I tried, Dad. I really did. Susan, standing beside John, shook her head. Ava, we could have found another way. The room was silent as Ava's confession sank in. I realized that beneath her vile actions lay a desperation we hadn't understood. I didn't know, I said softly. Why didn't you say something? Ava's eyes filled with tears. Pride, I guess. Stupid, stubborn pride. Mark adjusted his glasses, breaking the heavy silence. Ava, your reasons don't excuse your actions. There's still a legal process to follow. Ava nodded, defeated. I get it. I'll comply. Just, I don't know how to fix this. Luke walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. Start by being honest from now on. We'll figure it out together. Tears streamed down Ava's face as she broke down, the weight of her actions finally crushing her facade. Susan and John joined Luke, enveloping Ava in a hesitant group hug. As the evening wearied on, we pieced together the fragments of Ava's downfall. It was painful, but necessary. The family bonds, strained and frail, were being reinforced by the truth. In the days that followed, the legal process advanced, but the atmosphere at home lightened. Ava worked tirelessly to make amends, slowly earning back the trust she'd shattered. It would be a long journey, but for the first time in years, hope seemed possible. As we watched Ellie playing in the yard, Luke turned to me. We made it through, Rachel, I nodded, squeezing his hand. We did, and we'll keep moving forward together. In that moment, I realized that revenge had given way to something stronger, a chance for redemption and the beginning of healing. The storm had passed, and now it was time to rebuild. Our home was quieter now, the chaos of Ava's deceit slowly ebbing away. She made fewer visits, each one more sincere than the last. We were no longer walking on eggshells. One evening, as Luke and I sat with Mark in the living room, sorting through the final paperwork, the door creaked open. Ava walked in, carrying several sealed envelopes. What's this? I asked, exchanging a wary glance with Luke. It's the money, Ava replied, her voice steady but low. I've sold some stuff, liquidated what I could. It's not everything, but it's a start. Mark took the envelopes, skimming through them. This is a good first step, Ava. It shows you're committed to making things right. Thank you, Ava, Susan spoke softly from her spot near Dad. It means a lot to us. Ava looked down, ashamed yet relieved. I owe you all more than just money. I understand that now. Luke leaned forward. Actions speak louder than words, Ava. Keep doing the right thing, and trust will come in time. She nodded, her resolve firm. I will, I promise. A few weeks later, Ava's visits became more regular, not out of necessity, but out of genuine desire to reconnect. Each day, the wounds began to heal a little more. She started helping around the house, especially with Ellie, who had begun to warm up to her again. One sunny afternoon, Ellie ran into the living room, breathless and excited. Mom, Dad, Aunt Ava helped me build a birdhouse. Come see. Luke and I exchanged smiles, following Ellie outside. Ava stood there, paintbrush in hand, a genuine smile on her face. It was a sight I hadn't seen in a long time. Wow, this looks great, I exclaimed, admiring the colorful birdhouse. We made it together, Ellie beamed, hugging Ava's leg. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. For once, there was a sense of normalcy, a promise of better days ahead. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, John raised a toast, his voice frail but strong with emotion, to healing, to forgiveness, and to moving forward. We clinked our glasses, the sound a symbol of unity. Ava's face softened, reflecting the sincerity in her eyes. After dinner, as I tidied the kitchen, Ava approached me. Rachel, can we talk? Of course, I replied, setting down the dish towel. She hesitated, then spoke. I know I've caused a lot of pain, but I'm truly trying to change. I just need you to know that. I met her gaze, searching for any hint of deception, but all I saw was honesty. I believe you, Ava. Just keep showing up. Keep proving it. She nodded, and for the first time I felt a real connection between us. The next few months saw a gradual but significant transformation. Ava continued to make amends, and while the road to full forgiveness was long, each day brought us closer. One evening, as Luke and I sat on the porch watching Ellie chase fireflies, he turned to me. We've come a long way. We have, I agreed, feeling a peaceful sense of closure. I think we finally have a chance at peace, he continued, squeezing my hand. I smiled, leaning into him. Yes, we do, and we'll make sure it lasts. As the fireflies danced around us, I realized that while the past had been tumultuous, it had led us here. Stronger, united, and ready to embrace the future. Our family had faced betrayal, but we'd emerged resilient. The karma of Ava's actions had come full circle, bringing with it a chance for redemption and a new beginning. And as I looked at my family, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next together.